All right, a fine greetings to all of you. It is a lovely day. Or maybe it's not. Who knows? I don't know when you're watching this. But today we're looking at two things: big business and labor. If you're in my classes, we've been looking at Carnegie, we've been looking at Rockefeller, namely in their actions. But we also want to look at how these guys are making such staggering sums of money, and in turn, how workers respond to the businesses that they're working in and their bosses. So let's kick it. There's two, I guess, three types of businesses that we're going to be looking at. I'll strike that four that allow business owners in the late 1800s, early 1900s to make staggering sums of money. And the first one is called vertical integration. And with vertical integration, you can see in this image here that to produce something, it takes a lot of steps. And with those steps, a lot of people just consider like perhaps the factory. They own the factories. With vertical integration, they own everything from production of the raw materials to transporting it to processing it to transporting it again to selling it. So Carnegie, when he was working to develop his steel business, he realized that simply owning the factories was not enough. He, to make the best and most profits, needed to own everything. So he wasn't being charged by railroads. He wasn't being charged more by the mines that were producing the raw materials. So vertical integration allows you to control every aspect of production, which in turn makes you fantastically more profitable. So it costs a lot of money to undertake vertical integration, but once you have done it, it's really the best way to make money as a business. The second way of profiting and making massive sums of money is called horizontal integration. So instead of from the bottom up, from raw materials all the way to the top of selling your goods, horizontal integration essentially means creating a monopoly. So John D. Rockefeller, when he started getting into the oil business, he decided and realized that if he eliminated all of his competition by buying them all, then he could set the prices at whatever price that he wanted. So horizontal integration means that you buy out all of the other competing businesses in whatever field that you're in. So for Rockefeller, it meant buying all of the other oil processing companies, thus allowing him to corner the market and do whatever he wanted with it. It'd be like if Nike bought all of the other shoe companies in the world, in which case Nike could set the prices of their shoes to whatever price they wanted because no one else was making shoes. So that's what Rockefeller did with all of these oil refineries. And great. All right, the pool. We have certainly both of those, horizontal and vertical integration, require a great deal of money to either buy all of the businesses that help produce your good and distribute it, or buying all of the other competing businesses. A pool takes much less capital, takes much less money to establish, and it's essentially business owners agreeing with each other. So if you have two business owners, perhaps these two gentlemen own shoe companies. If they decided to agree to set the prices of shoes so that they're not competing, but they are agreeing on a price, so usually competition lowers the prices because you want to get more and more business. A pool essentially eliminates competition and allows business owners to set the prices that they want. Thus, also fairly unfair to the people that buy the goods. If you look at virtually all of these business options, it's great for the owners and really bad for consumers because they're getting stuck with really high prices and the owners are getting huge profits. And once you start seeing these people like Rockefeller making a ton of money, what he realizes is that with all of this money, he can start buying other businesses, or like railroads, like different investment firms. So you have, he even buys parts of US Steel. So trusts are these massive corporations that own a wide variety of different commercial interests. So it goes from simply people making money off of one industry or business to really controlling much of the economy, which is a bit frightening for especially the government and especially a lot of consumers, because they realize that with so much power concentrated within a small amount of people, uh, it's going to hurt the people that are buying these goods. So the government decides to try to push back. In 1890, we have a bill that's passed. It's called the Sherman Antitrust Act, and it was the first law that outlawed monopolistic business practices. So it prevents, in theory, businesses from controlling an entire industry. Now, this is good, but the problem is business owners, as shown in this cartoon here, are still wildly popular. Sorry, not popular, powerful. And with that power and money, they can influence politicians a great deal, both through bribery, through simple exerting their will and power with money. Um, and also, you're looking at the problem that with Sherman Antitrust Act, it's really hard to determine what a monopoly, what a trust is. It's not defined particularly well. So while a variety of businesses are brought to court as to violating Sherman Antitrust Act, it doesn't actually result in any convictions because the lawyers that represent them are able to argue that what their business is doesn't fall under the definition that is given in this law. So it's a good start for government to try to limit the power of these corporations and owners. However, it doesn't actually have much effect in the beginning. And all of these businesses are mostly operating in the north. So certainly while we're getting to the workers' rights and how workers start to fight for themselves against these people because the government's not particularly having much success. When it comes to the South post Reconstruction, they're really still primarily rural agricultural area. So while workers are going to be protesting and working for higher wages, the South doesn't even have that option because they didn't really build a lot of factories down there. So if you're looking at areas of the country that don't benefit really much at all from industrialization, the South is primarily the area that could have benefited a great deal, especially looking at post-Reconstruction era, where you have a huge amount of poverty and unemployment, but it doesn't. And that's why you see, which we'll get later on, as the Great Migration, where a lot of especially black workers move north. Speaking of workers, workers are really getting the short end of the stick for all of this. The business owners are not particularly caring in some cases. Certainly, we looked at Carnegie. He establishes a variety of programs for his workers, including pensions. But the majority of workers really are not in a good situation for this. So we start to see unions that are rising around these businesses. And the first one we have is called the National Labor Union. 1866, it's established. And really, it has three main ideas, which we'll see virtually every single union ever focuses on. Number one, shorter work days, namely 8-hour work days. Number two, higher wages. And B, more safety. So that's really what they're focusing on. It has a couple problems. It is really it's the first national labor union in the United States, but it wasn't super effective in bringing unskilled labor in. It doesn't do much for black workers or women, and it actively tries to exclude especially Chinese immigrants from even entering into the country, which they do have some success in doing. So it is a very good start. It doesn't last very long. It only lasts about 20 years. But then we have this next union, which on the right is the symbol for it, is called the Knights of Labor. And Knights of Labor is including far more people. It includes immigrants, it includes unskilled workers, railroad workers, steel workers. Um, so it tries to boost the uh, kind of universal nature of unions, which would in theory draw more people, and it does. By the mid 1880s, you have over 800,000 workers across the United States that are in unions, which is really positive because they're still fighting for those three things: 8-hour workdays, higher wages, and more safety. And one of the biggest events that happens, though, which is a pretty bad thing, but later on it does start to spur more unions going on, is the Haymarket Square incident, also known as the Haymarket Square riots. So 1886, there's a labor demonstration in Chicago at a square called Haymarket. Um, and primarily, they're focusing on the 8-hour workday. They're also responding to the day before police had shot a number of workers who were on strike. So they're protesting that event as well. So during the protest, someone, they don't know who, threw a stick of dynamite at a group of police officers. And in the ensuing shootings, 7 police officers were killed and at least 4 civilians. Initially, it results in a lot of negative publicity for unions, but later on, May 1st becomes what's known as May Day. It's the International Day of Workers, and it actually spurs a lot of focus on union and worker rights. And internationally is now a pretty big holiday across, especially North America, Europe, Mexico. It's a very popular day as well. So Haymarket Square incident, mostly attributed to anarchists, so people that actually want to have no government at all. So it also brings attention to this anarchist movement, which we'll get into a bit later, of perhaps maybe this idea of democratic capitalistic society isn't particularly working for all people. So that's big business. That's some labor, and we'll catch you next time.